So today I want to talk about success, and in particular, I want to talk about the effect that success has on people mentally. Because I've noticed something. I first noticed it a couple of years ago, and I thought maybe I was just seeing some mild exceptions or something. But the more I look, and the more people I know who become successful, the more I see that success makes people lose their fucking mind. It's only been over the last sort of few months that I've seen enough evidence of this, anecdotal evidence, granted, but verifiable evidence that the higher up somebody moves in terms of success with popularity and wealth and power, the crazier they get. And there are exceptions to this, but not many. Just look at Hollywood, look at the celebrity elite. They're all fucking crazy. Why? And it's worth us questioning this because a lot of us are chasing some sort of success, either power or wealth or fame, popularity. We're trying to get to the top of something, skill, mastery, maybe, which isn't so bad. And we think it's good to get there. We think it's a good place to get to, despite the fact that we've been warned by a lot of people who got there ahead of us. Turn back. Don't come here. It's not what you think it is. And yet we still chase it. I mean, how many of you are dreaming of wealth, How many people buy lottery tickets thinking that that's going to create a great life for them? What I've noticed, a number of people, I won't name them just for sake of, well, libel for a start, but also I don't want this video to be about any particular person. But there are a number of people I know personally and people that I admire from afar, famous people, who I've seen gradually slip into some sort of lunacy as their success increased. And there's two types of lunacy I'm talking about: conspiracy theories, and what I'd say is extreme religion. I don't want to just say religion because I know heaps of religious people who aren't crazy, but the kind of religion or the kind of religious fervor that makes you uncomfortable to be around. Like, that guy's really into Jesus, and even if you're into him, you're like, that's a bit too much. So I've noticed that two paths, sometimes both, that people I've known personally and others go down, and where it leads them, the darkness and the hate and sometimes self-loathing and suicide that it leads them to. We can see it, and there's some key figures I will name because they're already well known, and I'm not saying anything that can't be verified. Jordan Peterson is a great example. When he first came out, he was more a scholar, I guess you would say, and a enthusiast of Jung for sure, and had a strong interest in Christianity over all other religions, and mostly from the Jungian archetype thing that he's into, which, by the way, is severely outdated and unscientific, but regardless. Lately, he's becoming ever more fervently Christian, isn't he? He's kind of sliding down and becoming kind of quite religious, but in a way that's concerns me for his mental health. Like, there's a recent video where he broke down in tears about the connection between the sort of spiritual and the real world and things like that. And it just looked like he's kind of losing his grip a little bit. I'm not saying breaking down in tears is bad, but he's so overwhelmed by it emotionally that his previous rationality that I admired him for when he first kind of came out has become ever more something else, not quite rationality. Robin Williams, the height of fame, the height of success, committed suicide. There are a lot of famous celebrity comics and actors and so on who commit suicide. I mean, do you know how shit you have to feel to commit suicide? You have to be really, really down. It's not just a bad day, it's bad years that lead to suicide. And yet they had everything we've ever wanted. There's an associate of mine, I won't call him a friend, but an associate who runs one of the most successful blogs on the internet. And when I first interacted with him, I've shared some of my work on his blog. He was quite scientific. He was really into the science behind psychology and so on. And now he's become almost out of nowhere, like he disappeared and came back, very fundamental Christian. Just out of nowhere. Now, like, most of what he talks about has God somewhere in the paragraph, right? To that point where it's like it's a bit much. Like, you don't have to relate everything to God, you know. Thank God for this breakfast. Like, take it easy. And he's just become like it seems to be, it coincided with him kind of breaking through to quite extreme levels of wealth. He kind of got into the top 1%, I'd say. Uh, and suddenly he became fundamentally religious. You know, another friend of mine, a dating coach, his profile went up. He became really popular, you'd say, and probably was doing all right financially, at least that point where you don't have problems anymore, which is the point of this video, like what happens when you run out of problems. And I went to go have a chat with him and found out that he believed in chemtrails. He believed that the planes are dropping mind control agents on us. And I was like, huh, is that right? So I got to go now. Another friend of mine, again, very successful, very rational, awesome dude. Really into him. He totally thinks COVID's a scam. He's encouraging people to not wear masks and to integrate with each other. And again, he wasn't really like this or into anything like that until he made it big. And he's one of many who, not just one conspiracy theory, but they seem to like be trying to collect the whole set. You know, what's that thing with conspiracy theorists where they don't just pick one? They're like, once they believe one, they start collecting them all. It's like, maybe we didn't land on the moon, and I think Biden's secretly a reptile. And they just start going down this rabbit hole of endless conspiracy theories. Even like you look at the mass shootings happening in the United States, a lot of this is done by like spoiled, privileged white guys. Right? Guys who, it's like on paper they don't have any problems. I mean, obviously they do have problems to behave like that, but they don't have the kind of problems that people would relate to. Struggling in poverty, for example. They're not dealing with a serious health crisis. The problem they seem to have is that they don't have any real problems, and they start to get psychologically fucked up by that. And this is where I'm really going today. Is I've got this kind of hypothesis, more than a theory, hypothesis, that if we don't have what you might call real problems, problems that require you to get your hands dirty and solve during the day, and they're stressful and hard to deal with, your brain won't just sit there going content, satisfaction, this is good. It's like when people win lottery, it's not like a year later they're like, fuck, I really don't have any problems. They'll find some problems. In fact, they often create some by ruining their financial winnings. And it was Mark Manson that first put me onto this idea that essentially the human brain is wired for dissatisfaction. It's one of the reasons we kind of dominate the planet is we've never had enough. We're never satisfied. So no matter how much we get, we always want more. And this is why trying to get to a place where there's no problems in your life is pointless and actually dangerous, is because there is no such place. Even if on paper everyone looks at your life and on paper they think, man, that guy's got an awesome life, you're still going to have problems. The Kardashians still complain on a regular basis about their lives. And yet most of us would look at them and go, you don't have problems, pal. You know, your problem is you're too famous. That's not a problem. But it actually is to them. I came to this realization. I used to work with some very fucked up people in Department of Corrections, and there was one guy in particular who was a ex-child soldier who'd been refugeed over to New Zealand. This is a guy who had committed murders before the age of 10, mass murders and rapes. That's a guy with real problems. Real fucking problems, okay? His parents murdered and raped in front of his eyes, raised to be a child soldier, you know, orphaned and often in most of his life in poverty, starving. When he wasn't starving, he was killing. That's real problems. There's very few people watching this can go like, well, his life's not as bad as mine though, right? Like that, he is fundamentally broken. He was unfixable when we got our hands on him. Like, we're just trying to stop him committing serious crimes. That was the best we could do. Minor crimes would be like, it's just minor crimes this week, because he was just so fucked up. The funny thing is, there'd be like a time I'd be in a session with him, he'd be stressing out about something, and I'd just be watching him stress out. I'm like, he looks like anybody else stressing out about something. And I think around at that time, there was something about like maybe the Kardashians or Paris Hilton, one of those socialites on TV, and they were stressing out about something, and it looked the same. I was like, this guy, this child soldier who's living in poverty on the streets, looks the same when he's stressed out than, say, Paris Hilton when the dog shat in one of her new Jimmy shoes, right? And I was like, whoa, they're equally in pain, right? This guy, the amount of pain he's feeling is equal to the amount of pain she's feeling. And yet, on paper, their lives are fucking like this, right? Like she's living in absolute luxury heaven compared to his hell that he is in. And yet, the amount of suffering they're experiencing is probably, on a graph, it would be about the same. What Mark Manson talks about is you need to have better problems, not end your problems, but find good problems to have. And so many people trying to end their problems just end up finding really pathetic things to have problems about. I know I'm being quite judgmental, but fuck it, that's what I believe. Diving into a conspiracy theory, you know, I don't even care if it's real or not. But for example, the amount of people that get up in arms, say, about whether or not we should wear masks for COVID, I'm like, if you want a conspiracy theory, if you want a conspiracy theory, how about child sex trafficking? Like, how about a real fucking problem, right? One with there's plenty of evidence and people are suffering far more. You think wearing a mask is suffering? Being abducted as a 6-year-old and passed around like a sex toy, that's fucking suffering. And that's happening to hundreds of thousands of children every year. But you don't care about that one? You care about the fucking mask thing? This is what I mean. You need better problems. Masks are not a problem, right? Objectively in the world and the scale of problems, that is a spoiled, rich, we don't have any problems problem. Like if you're complaining about masks, your life is fucking awesome compared to most people's in the world. All right? It means you're not struggling to find something to eat, right? It means you're not being sexually abused on a daily basis. It means you're not dying of cancer. It means you're doing so well that masks are a problem for you. And that's a problem in and of itself. If masks, wearing masks or some other sort of conspiracy theory thing is your biggest beef right now, you need better problems to have. That is not a quality problem. That is a waste of life and energy and resources, even if you're right. In terms of conspiracy theories, the stuff you're worried about is so much less than the real shit that's actually happening that can be proven. No matter what conspiracy theory you believe in, right now, there are hundreds of thousands of children being trafficked for sexual abuse. Don't tell me your one's worse than that. I don't care if George Bush did 9/11. It's not worse than that, right? And yet you're focused on this thing like it's a real problem when it's clearly fucking not. I've had it happen to me, as judgmental as I sound. I've been here. I know this issue. It happened to me when I started making money. As at my old job in corrections, I'd be moving up the ladder corporately, I guess you'd say. Is it corporate? Doesn't matter. And I'd gotten to the point where I crossed the $75,000 $75,000 a year mark. And studies are showing, like, it's bang on. Studies have shown that around that point, extra money doesn't make you any happier. So up until that point, when you get a bonus or you've come into money, your happiness goes up in general. But once you get to 75, extra money doesn't make much of a difference. And I started to experience that as I went from 75 to 77 up to 85 eventually. I was like, these promotions aren't doing anything for my life. I don't feel any better. And before that, my problem had been trying to move up in my career. But once I got there, I just started floundering because I was there now. I was at that point where I never had to look at my bank account. I never had to worry about seeing the numbers in red, right? I was always all good. If I ran out of money, there'd be a heap more coming in next week. I could travel. I could buy things spontaneously. I didn't budget. I should have, but I didn't. I was at that place with money. And I didn't realize that was a bad place to be because once you're there, a lot of your problems are gone. And they were problems that were giving you meaning and purpose. They were problems that were using up your energy in a healthy way. They were problems worth solving. When you run out of those problems and you haven't prepared for this scenario, you start going down a dark place. I started to get really worked up about posts that I'd see on Facebook, for example. I'd get into arguments with people in the comment section of YouTube. I'd get into big debates with other metal guys about politics. Shit I don't actually give a fuck about. But suddenly I did. Now I care a lot about it. Why? Because I'd run out of real problems to have and now I'm looking for problems. But rather than looking consciously like, I've got to find some good problems to have, I was just letting whatever aggravated me become my fucking mission. And this is what I see a lot with guys who are into conspiracy theories and religion. It's like they're vulnerable to attack. They open up like, okay, world, give me a mission. And they'll just take what they're given. Somebody say, there's no gold behind our money. It's all a big scam by the bankers. And they're like, okay, that's my mission now. Without stopping to think, do I actually give a fuck about that? Is that what I want to spend my life doing? Like what Sam Harris says, is this the hill I want to die on? Really? Of all the things I could be doing with my life, is this the most important one I can think of? Is this the most satisfying one I can think of? Why is it that conspiracy theorists seem so unsatisfied all the time if that is the mission that they should be on? Right? Why are they so aggravated by it constantly? Why do they storm Capitol Hill and riot? That's not satisfied people there. That's not people who are content with their lives. That's people who don't have big enough problems to deal with, and they've turned a little problem into a big one. Without meaningful issues, your brain will create problems where there aren't any. That's the default setting. Your brain will find a problem to have. If you don't find it consciously, it will find it subconsciously. It will attach to anything that it finds mildly irritating. You think of the classic Karen caricature, that meme, that lady who just blows up at the cashier of Dunkin' Donuts because she gave her a flat white instead of a latte. True story, it happened to me. You're just like, that's your problem? You just spend an hour of your day yelling because you got slightly extra foam in your coffee? Do you understand how privileged that problem is? Do you understand how 99% of the world will look at that and go, I don't get it, where's the problem? I can't believe you can buy coffee, you're so lucky. You know what I mean? That's the problem with a Karen. That kind of spoiled white middle-aged woman who never did anything about their career perhaps, and just once the kids are grown up and not dependent on them anymore, they just started to get filled with this dread, like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And now they become anti-vaxxers or something. They find some problem to have that isn't really real. It isn't what they're fucking passionate about. It's just what they're angry about. And it's not the same as being passionate. See, conspiracy theorists and so on, and often like the really sort of fervently religious, like scary religious people, it's not a place of passion they're coming from. It's a place of rage. Have you noticed that? Like I'm friends with a lot of moderate Christians, moderate moderate Muslims, Islamists. They don't get enraged about their religion. They, in fact, almost without exception, they have a live and let live policy. They're like, I know you're an atheist, but you'll come to the light eventually. They don't push it. But the few people I know who are really into it, they get angry really easily. They're the kind of people who go throw rocks at women going to get an abortion. Like, they've got this rage and this hate in them. You don't see that in somebody who's found the right problem to solve. You see that in somebody who's been persuaded into a different problem that isn't really meaningful to them, and it's just provoking them. See, without issues, we get existential dread, and that's the foundation for hate. It's a deep fear. Hate is a manifestation of a deep, chaotic fear. If you don't find something to care about with love, you'll find something to rage about with hate, right? But you've got to find something, because your brain can't sit there and go, hey, I have no reason to live. I can't handle that. It's too much, so we'll find anything. Vaccines have mercury in them. All right, that'll do. Rah, off you go and lose your mind. Without, I saw this recently. I've seen quite a few people I know with the whole COVID thing and thinking that it's a scam by the government or something of that ilk. And I'm like, before you got into that, you were doing something good with your life, and now you're doing this. What the fuck? Like, like one person I know is really into like helping others and was doing really good work, and now they're just like their whole bandwidth is taken up with proving that COVID isn't real. I'm like, dude, you were helping people before. Now you're doing nothing. You're just whinging now. What happened? We've got to learn from the people who found good problems to have after they became successful. Stephen King, arguably the most successful author of all time. Am I right in saying that? I mean, most prolifically published, surely. It's got to be up there. He's a guy who's at real risk of not having any problems, and you can actually see it sometimes. I follow him on Twitter. I shouldn't even be on Twitter, but I follow him there. Sometimes his political complaint tweets are a bit like, dude, you need to find something else to do. But what was different about, say, Stephen King and many other like super famous authors, say like Wilbur Smith, who ended up getting other people to write books for him and went down this weird path. Stephen King had a big car accident. Well, to be fair, he got hit by a car and it really fucked him up. What I'd say is, in a way, he got lucky because he got real problems to have. His writing was amazing. Following that accident, there's a book, Dreamcatcher, it was made into a movie where he incorporated the accident into the book. It's just so beautifully done with the character. But he had a real problem presented to him, and it took him away from the heights of privilege, back into reality, back into down in the dirt, being a human and suffering. And I think that stopped him from going crazy. A guy like Stephen King should be very crazy by now, but he's not. Jim Carrey, he was on the list of the next Robin Williams to kill himself list. He's the next guy to suddenly commit suicide and never go, what? I thought he was so happy. I don't know what caused his breakthrough, but he had one, and now he has real problems. And what I mean by that is, before he was just trying to be the funny guy, he's trying to be Jim Carrey. He had some sort of philosophical breakthrough where he realized that everything was just fake, that he was an illusion himself, and so on. And now his movies are different. Like, they've tanked basically compared to his previous movies because his acting isn't so try hard anymore. But I think it's better now. Like, he does this little cameo in God, what's that movie with the guys who eat each other and stuff? The something ones, the Bad Bunch, Bad Bunch, obscure little movie, and he has a non-speaking role in it, but it's fucking brilliant. I love him in that. He's like my favorite character in it. I didn't even know it was him. But anyway, the point is he's gotten into painting now. It's like he was always supposed to be an actual artist with paint. He didn't discover it until recently, until he had his breakthrough, and he found real problems to have. So now he paints like political paintings quite often now. He kind of makes a statement with his drawings. He was anti-Trump for a while, and now I don't know, he's into whatever. But he's decided to take a stand politically through art, and he's been able to channel the crazy and rather than let it overwhelm him. Whereas, say, Robin Williams kept on pleasing people. Jim Carrey stopped doing that. He finally found a real problem to have rather than the problem of being popular. Steve-O from Jackass, he's really big on veganism and health at the moment and recovery from drug addiction. He was on a bad path. It was too awesome to be Steve-O, and he was so extreme, with his stunts and everything. To get high, to find something to thrill him would have been very difficult because he's done it all. But he managed to somehow switch it around and focus on health and good living instead. And he managed to keep the crazy at the door. He was definitely a candidate for suicide. So rather than trying to become problem-free, what these guys did have found healthy problems to have. I had to do it with myself. Start my own business. That's what I did to solve that problem I was having with having too much money, essentially. Starting your own business will take care of that fucking problem. If you're like most business owners, you're not going to have too much money after that, I promise you. And you'll be back to you get a real problem of you don't even have a paycheck, you don't have an employer. You have to go out and hunt for your food, sort of thing. It really stops you bothering with conspiracy theories and stuff. You're not too worried about whether or not God's real when you got to put food on the table. it gives you a real problem to have. Taking on a difficult hobby. I think this one's available especially to anyone who's in that privileged position where you're not in poverty, you're not suffering from major health issues, you're not having any sort of like relationship problems. A difficult hobby, like something that you're not going to be good at for ages, not something you're instantly good at. That's what a lot of people try to find with a hobby without problems. Find one where you go there and after your first class or whatever, you liked it, but you definitely suck. Like you're not going to excel. You're not naturally talented. When I went and did dancing, I was kind of natural at it. I didn't know I could naturally dance. But it created a problem where I could easily get into a comfort zone and dancing wasn't problematic anymore. So I had to keep pushing it. I had to try like acrobatic tricks or competing or changing dance styles. Right now, I'm learning how to play chess. And sometimes I follow this guy, Magnus Carlsen. He's currently the best in the world and considered the best of all time. When I watch him play, I'm like, fuck, I'm so far away from that. Like, I'm never going to be that. Guy's got an IQ of 190. I'm never going to be as good as him. So I've found a hobby that is always going to be hard for me. It's a good problem to have, as opposed to a hobby where I can just dominate quickly and then I'm like bored again and start looking for problems. So stop looking for an easy life, because an easy life will drive you insane. You need to have problems. But there are such things as bad problems. Being in poverty is a bad problem, right? Having cancer is a bad problem. Being in a toxic relationship with a narcissist, that's a bad problem. These are not good problems to have. You won't always be able to choose whether or not you have them. But a lot of the time, they're problems that you could eliminate if you focused on them. And then once you have eliminated those main survival problems, don't just coast, because your life's going to become miserable if you do. You need to find good problems to have. Hope that rant helped somebody. Hope it saves somebody from the dark web of conspiracy theories that seems to be consuming the human race like a virus. Find something good to do with your life that's hard to do, and you'll be far more satisfied than if you're living it easy and taking the easy way out. I'll see you all next time. Cheers.